Okay, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Hello and good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to our Reaction Commerce webinar series, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. So before we get started, let's get a few quick housekeeping points out of the way. We are recording this event and we will make it available for future reference. We will open the floor for Q&A at the end of our prepared content section. Feel free, however, to post your questions as they come to mind in the Q&A section of Zoom. If we can't get to all the questions, we'll be sure to answer them in our recap blog post that we'll be sharing sometime in the next week. So we have about 30 minutes of content planned for today. Whether you are on the business side or in IT, you need to think about modern commerce transformation as a cultural change. This includes tools, software systems, and the underlying architecture too. So our goals for this webinar are to help you to understand key principles to retool your enterprise for modern commerce, and to see why updating your core technology makes good business sense today, and to learn how IT and business and agencies can achieve true enterprise-wide digital transformation. So hi everyone, I'm Sarah Hicks. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reaction Commerce, and with me is Tyson Bennett, who is leading the architecture, direction, and vision for Reaction. So without further delay, let me jump right in. We're in the midst of a major revolution. Technology, globalization, and generational shifts are fundamentally changing and driving consumer behaviors. This includes everything from how we shop, where we shop, what we value, and what we expect. All of these things have shifted in a very, very short period of time. The last decade in commerce has seen truly tectonic shifts. E-commerce has jumped from just a few percentage points of a multi-trillion-dollar industry to close to 15% of all retail spending. And while most retailers have moved aggressively into e-commerce by now, their ability to integrate back-end systems and make use of data across channels is still very much a work in progress. Features like order anywhere and pick up anywhere are very challenging for retailers to get right today. And at the same time, advanced technologies are pushing boundaries even further and faster. So when we talk with retail execs these days, the biggest pain point they cite is almost always some variation on this theme. They say things like, our legacy commerce technology is putting us further and further behind our goals. Retailers are burning through their technology budgets, just maintaining their monolithic systems. These systems are not only slow to update, but the front end is tightly coupled to the back end, leaving little room for flexibility or experimentation. They are hitting up against limitations of their commerce implementations, which frankly were built for a different era of commerce. It was an era where it was desktop first. Mobile commerce or omnichannel were then bolted on, and the sites were more transactional than experiential. Retailers are ending up with a Frankenstein technology stack that is limiting their ability to innovate, to take control of their roadmap, and to take advantage of these new technologies. So the customer journey is nonlinear. Retailers and brands need to meet customers where they are shopping, and that's everywhere today. For example, almost 70% of US consumers buy online and they pick up in store. And brick and mortar isn't going away, but it certainly needs to evolve. For every dollar that's spent online today, there's still $4.82 that's spent in store. These changes in consumer habits are driving today's commerce, and retailers and brands who adopt a holistic commerce mindset are the ones who will win. And all of this is enabled by the technology that retailers embrace. To put it directly, all retail companies are tech companies today. And this is a new era of modern commerce. It's mobile first, it's real time, it has to be data driven, it's cross-channel, and it offers frictionless, personalized experiences. And in this next section, I'm going to invite Tyson to join me as we walk through the key principles that define a modern commerce platform. As I mentioned earlier, Tyson is the lead software architect with several years of experience working on commerce systems. He's worked both on client-side implementations and on vendor software platforms. And now I'm truly fortunate to say that he's my colleague at Reaction Commerce. Tyson's going to break down these architectural principles. So Tyson, welcome, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah. So happy to join you this morning.
Awesome. So we know by now that most current commerce implementations can't support today's commerce demands. So how do these systems need to evolve? And what do our listeners today need to consider as they make decisions?
Absolutely. Commerce is moving fast. New technologies have emerged and shopper expectations have changed. So we need to consider some fundamental system and architectural decisions to transform the enterprise. Let's focus on 4 principles that make this kind of transformation possible. First, event-driven architectures and real-time capabilities. This is an architectural style that's been gaining traction over the last few years. And we see this as a fundamentally important tool to build modern commerce systems that are backward compatible and future ready. And real-time capabilities have become a baseline customer expectation. So real-time becomes easier with event-driven architectures. Second is microservices, which can help make systems more modular and flexible, and they can help unlock your development process. Third is headless first, and this enables merchants to separate their business capabilities from specific channels and leverage them in a more global way. And finally, implementing cloud-native apps for scale, performance, and portability.
So let's first talk about events. So Gartner analysts have reported that by 2020, event-sourced real-time situational awareness will be a required characteristic for 80% of digital business solutions. And 80% of new business ecosystems will require support for event processing. 80% is a pretty big number. So help our listeners, Tyson, to make sense of this.
It is a big number. And when I see this, I think customers demand real time, whether they realize it or not. They expect a constant flow of up-to-date information about their orders, accounts, and everything else. Retail giants like Amazon are using specialized technologies to set the new standard for customers' expectations across the board. So you may be wondering, how can you keep up? And we see event-driven architectures as an answer to that.
Well, let's break it down. What does it mean to be event-driven?
Yeah, let's start by defining events themselves. So events are facts about things that have happened at a particular point in time. So an event has a recorded time at which it happened, and it usually carries some details about what happened and who caused it. So being event-driven means that we design software that consumes and produces events as its main mode of operation. And if we take a step back, we can see that we naturally think about things in terms of events. So let's say that a customer places an order. That's an event. We actually say order placed in the past tense because it's a fact that can't be changed. And even if we were to decide to invalidate the order, we can't change the fact that the user placed it. And it's common to see new events that follow and are caused by the original. So for order placed, we might see something like this. An order confirmation email was sent to the customer. The order was shipped. And finally, the order was completed. In a different scenario, maybe fraud was detected by the system and then the order was invalidated. Now, I admit this is a simplified view of the order process, but hopefully it's enough to illustrate how events are a natural fit for a commerce system. If we retrace the flow of these events, then we start to see this story unfold. By simply recording the events from our example, we see a customer's journey through the order process.
So when I look at this, Tyson, it's starting to look like an audit log. You can actually see the story unfold.
Yeah, well, that's right. So audit logs are a view of the events and the actors that have caused them. And so once we made the events available, it was really easy for us to build an audit log for our order taking application.
So let's take a look at how event-driven apps can help us to get to real time.
So real-time apps are reactive and they respond almost immediately to things as they're happening. And almost all the apps that we use today are real-time. So we can play real-time games, we can see our Lyft or Uber ride coming around the corner, and we can even talk to Google and get immediate answers. So as customers, I think that it's fair that we expect this while we shop too. And this is a lot easier to do with event-driven applications. And I'll show that with our orders example. The user places an order. So here we can see the order system. So the order system generates an order placed event. And this event should be stored somewhere safe and persistent. Then we have two other systems, notifications and shipments. Now, both of these systems are constantly looking for new events, and they track their progress as they process those events. They're both consuming order-placed events, and they can process those in parallel. We see that notifications consumes the events, and it takes action. And it immediately sends a notification to the user, and it creates the order confirmation sent event. And likewise, the shipping system receives the event, but here we have a more involved back-end process. So someone in the warehouse gets notified of the order, and then they find the items for order, and once they ship them, we're going to get an order shipped event. Finally, the order system consumes the order shipped event, and it marks the order complete. So the order complete event is produced. So I'd like to note here that in event-driven thinking, our applications produce these events without targeting a specific consumer, and this makes our system more flexible.
So super helpful, and I think it would be great if you could explain maybe some of the benefits of an event-driven and real-time system.
Yeah, well, first, event-driven architecture unlocks your data. Databases are great, but they form a boundary around your data, and you can only get to it through an API or backend export or import. But events expose data to the outside, and they make real-time possible across your business boundaries. Next, your development teams can move faster and build the product that matters. So clean boundaries between event producers and consumers reduce friction, and event-first thinking creates a conversation between your development teams and your subject matter experts. You can also better connect with your customer. Features like real-time notifications and personalization can help increase confidence and trust with the users that matter. And we'll show in our microservices section how you can quickly experiment. So build new apps and keep the ones that work, that improve customer experience and increase conversions.
So as we've seen at Reaction, the adoption of events doesn't happen by accident. So it's important to choose new platforms that have event-first architectures. What are some of the key features that can help you to distinguish mature solutions from the others?
The first would be an event-driven backbone. Application events should be stored in a commonly accessible storage. And we use Apache Kafka here at Reaction Commerce, and it's a really good fit for this. Data pipelines replace batch. So scheduled batch operations are cumbersome, and they're the opposite of real time. Event-driven systems are more likely to flow data through streaming pipelines. Now, we can't change data that lives outside of our system, so we might have some batch at the edge and convert that data to streamed events on the inside. And finally, when components communicate with events, the event schemas, that's the shape of the event data, becomes the system contract. So mature solutions provide tools to enforce and evolve the schemas. And we strongly recommend a centralized schema registry. And at Reaction, we've configured our registry to throw an error if developers try to evolve a schema in an incompatible way.
Okay, so let's switch over to microservices. And so when you think about it, commerce today is probably a classic use case of how services can be made independent and modular, and yet still work together in an entire system. And that's because there's already a clear definition of these independent services. So think about it. In commerce, we've got cart and checkout, we've got product, we've got catalogs, we've got customer accounts, we have orders, inventory, shipping, taxes, all these independent services.
Yeah, I agree. Commerce is a great case for microservices. Each of the systems that you just gave some good examples, and each of those require a lot of specialized expertise to design and to operate.
And the enterprise commerce implementations that we usually see have a lot of services and a lot of vendors, as you can see here from this diagram. They've developed naturally over time as new solutions were added one by one to meet a business need. It's quite natural. The problem is that they're usually not designed to work together or to work cohesively. But in the modern commerce stack, we're seeing microservices that do work together and communicate data through events.
Yeah, that's right. And here's an example of how event-driven architectures can help us build microservices in a sustainable way. So let's imagine that you'd like to build a new promotions engine. So instead of building this into the existing monolith, we can build it as a standalone service. So we'll spin up a new team to build the promotions functionality. And then they will focus on the domain of the feature, and they're going to collaborate with the internal stakeholders and the external users. The promotions engine is new functionality, but it's going to need to access some of the data from across the business. And we can see some of those components here: customers, products, pricing. So how do we make that data available to promotions? So we want the service to be real time, so we want to avoid database imports and exports. And we'd like for our team to own the uptime of the service. So if possible, we're going to avoid runtime calls to the other services. So let's consume the events produced by the other services. The consumed data can be stored locally if needed, and our new team can build a microservice that's real-time and self-contained. When the team's ready to go to production, then they can ship it and they can scale it. And as this service evolves, the team's in control. They can perform upgrades and migrations on their own schedule.
So we've seen at Reaction how microservices can improve the pace of innovation. With microservices, you can experiment with new services, and you can keep the experiments that succeed. You can learn from the ones that don't, and you can throw away the failed experiments. And a team benefit of microservices is a shift from a project focus to a product focus. And we think this is a healthy reframe on what matters most: the product delivered to the end customer.
Yeah, exactly. And with microservices, we get several runtime benefits. Services can be scaled individually as needed, and this can help you meet demand and to reduce costs. And event-driven microservices are also more resilient to failure. And this helps keep your products online for your customers.
Now let's talk about headless commerce and APIs. How are these related? And in your mind, what's really driving this change?
Well, I think headless it's a general concept, but it's really important. And going headless means exposing commerce capabilities by an API. And that API is used to build customized front-end experiences in client-side applications. So in legacy systems, the front end is tightly coupled to the back end, but customers want a unified experience across devices. And when they're in the store, they're looking for personalized service. So a single API makes this possible. I'm going to cover a few ways in how it does that. First, going headless integrates your multi-channel clients. So we use GraphQL at Reaction. Some of the features I'm going to show here are made easier by GraphQL, but going headless is important whether you use GraphQL or REST. But here we can see many clients that are connected to a single headless API. So we have the usual suspects like web and mobile, but we can have others too. So maybe a voice assistant like Alexa. And the clients can go beyond customer interfaces, and they can be built for your backend too. So your team members in the warehouse might need a simple interface that's custom built for picking and packing. All of these can connect to your business through a single API. Going headless also enables you to access and unify the data sources that are behind the API boundary. And the API can stitch all of your data together into a single interface. So now we're showing how the API exposes internal data sources like customers and orders. That data is coming from in-house. But it's also possible to stitch external data sources like online reviews and external CMS. So in this way, our front-end development teams can interact with a single API, and they're going to benefit from working with a single set of conventions and security access.
So that makes a ton of sense. Let's shift over to some of the benefits you can expect to see at the business level from going headless.
Probably the biggest one is that it eases the evolution of your commerce stack. So GraphQL in particular has a typed schema, which means that the API documentation lives in the API, and it's always up to date and it's readable. So over time, new capabilities can be added easily too. And since it's possible to monitor API usage, we can sunset features once we know that they're no longer used.
Okay, so now what should our listeners be looking for in a mature headless commerce solution?
Yeah, well, first, I think the API should be full spectrum. And what I mean by this is that there's an API first approach and that all the functions are exposed in that single API. We think it's important to have a single API that encompasses all the features, and we see multiple APIs as kind of an anti-pattern. Next, the API can handle many common concerns like authenticating the clients and making sure that they have the right privileges to access the resources that they're looking for. Handling this in one place in your API makes it more auditable and secure, and it relieves your developers from having to re-implement these solutions over and over in each backend service. And the most advanced solutions support dynamic service registry. And this means that teams can register the backend services to the API at runtime, and decentralizing in this way empowers teams to move faster, and it prevents bottlenecks at the deployment pipeline. And finally, retooling for modern commerce leads us to a preference for cloud-native applications. So cloud-native apps, what we mean by that is that they cash in on the strengths of the cloud, and that can be public or private cloud. And here are some aspects of the cloud that help deliver features to your customers faster. The first is scalability. The cloud offers tremendous power to scale, and apps like microservices that are designed with fine-grained scalability can help you meet demand and reduce costs. Managed hosting can help you focus on your own application while trusting deep operational challenges to specialized experts. And the cloud's programmable, right? So the software delivery is safer and more repeatable when embracing DevOps. And cloud-native apps provide the flexibility to respond in an ever-changing marketplace. So just to tie everything together, it becomes much easier to build cloud-native apps when you embrace event-driven architectures, microservices, and a headless-first approach.
Thank you so much, Tyson, for breaking down the fundamental changes to make modern commerce transformation possible. We're going to have Tyson stick around for the Q&A, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But before we do that, I'd like to give you all a quick overview of Reaction Commerce and our approach to commerce. So Reaction Commerce is completely open, real-time, and headless commerce. We've been open source from day one, where we immediately saw traction with a global community of developers, retailers, and agencies who've been following our technology on GitHub. So because commerce is real-time, we built Reaction to be real-time reactive from the ground up. And we enable true API-first headless capabilities to support the needs of modern commerce. Reaction is built on a modern tech stack. We use Node.js, React, GraphQL, Kafka, and Docker, which are some of the leading technologies that developers are flocking towards today. We are an engine for modern enterprise commerce, rebuilding from the core so you avoid the issues of legacy Frankenstein implementations, where your systems are all well integrated, your data is a single source of truth, and your tech is extendable and future ready. We're the fastest growing and most popular open commerce solution ever, with almost 9,000 stars on our main GitHub repository. We're backed by Google Ventures. We're a globally distributed team. We're recording this webinar live from our headquarters in Santa Monica, but we are dispersed around the world as a team. And we're now working directly with enterprise retailers to help them to modernize and retool their commerce systems. So if you're interested in learning more about Reaction Commerce, please get in touch. There's multiple ways you can interact with us. If you're a brand or retailer, come to our site and let us know if you're interested in a demo or more information. If you're an agency and you're working with clients, we'd love to work together. We're building up an agency partner program. And of course, developers. We have a vibrant open source developer community. Please check out our docs. We've got active chat and forums, and we'd love to hear from you. So why don't we go ahead and jump into the Q&A. So I'll toss a question to you. And just a reminder to everyone, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them into the Zoom Q&A section. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. But again, if we can't get to them, we'll cover them in our recap blog post. So Tyson, maybe you talked a little bit about microservices approach requiring you to have a team for each new service. Can we talk a little bit about what does that look like for small teams especially? Yeah, right. Well, that's a good question. I think that when we say team, it can be in the metaphorical sense in the beginning. We're really talking about, when we're talking about microservices, it's not about the size of the code base. It's really about building applications that are able to function independently and on their own. So it could be a team building a set of functionality wearing different hats. And it doesn't mean that you have to have dedicated teams and a huge workforce. That makes a ton of sense. So there was a question that came in earlier about maybe examples of enterprises that are successfully migrating to microservices. So I'll go ahead and take that one. We did a little bit of research, and kind of the usual suspects that everyone talks about is Netflix and even Spotify. They've implemented kind of microservices type solutions. But there are some examples like Home Depot and Jet.com that are out there that have gone from pretty, monolithic kind of implementations to shift over a period of time to microservices. And I think we read some stat where even Jet.com has something like 700 microservices implementations. So you're starting to see major retailers, as well as even the smaller ones, starting to adopt microservices and microservices implementations. And you can really start to do it over time. It doesn't have to be this big kind of re-platform effort. It can take multiple stages as you move these independent applications over to a microservices architecture. I don't know, here's one from Mo I see coming into the Q&A. So how difficult is it to run Reaction as a serverless environment? Maybe Tyson, you want to talk a little bit about the architecture for Reaction and running it?
Yeah, right. Well, serverless, Reaction isn't intended to run as a serverless application at the moment. We are cloud ready, and there are it's fairly easy to run with Docker. In some custom implementations, we do see serverless integrations with Reaction. So I think they go hand in hand, and our model fits very well with serverless, but our main applications aren't serverless right now.
Yep. So how are events different from traditional messaging, Tyson? It's a question that came in a little while ago.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think that one is the storage mechanism. So events fits really well with distributed logs. And so I could compare distributed logs to traditional messaging. And in traditional messages, once the event or the message is consumed, it's act and it really gets deleted from the queue that it would be in. Where in a distributed log, those events remain persistent. So it's up to the client that's reading the events to track its state. And in that way, it's easy to have a single source, the event log, with many consumers. And this really frees us up to persist that data and to keep it there so that it could be read in the future.
Makes a ton of sense. The question we got about, does Reaction Commerce work with other technologies and frameworks like Gatsby or Express? So I'll take that one. And the answer is yes. There are storefronts out there running Reaction Commerce that are using Next.js. We have an example storefront that's running Next.js. We've got storefronts out there running Express.js. I've seen recently a Gatsby implementation that's running Reaction Commerce that looks really great. So as long as it interacts and works with GraphQL, in terms of your storefront, it's going to work running Reaction Commerce. Here's a question around, let's just try to go back to some of the questions that are coming in. Kind of, Viraj, you asked if Reaction Commerce might be a little bit overkill solution for a niche e-commerce store, which sells maybe only 2 to 3 products. And I think like it really depends on your needs. Yes, it's a pretty robust and flexible and extendable commerce solution. But I think it really depends on kind of what your needs are. I don't think it necessarily would be overkill just because you only have 2 or 3 products. It really depends on your kind of development philosophy and kind of anything you wanted to be able to do kind of more rapid development and continuous integration, continuous development. I don't know, Tyson, if you had anything to add to that, but that was my initial thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Fair enough. So how important, here's Joe, got a question about Alexa. How important is Alexa at this point? Alexa integration is something we are implementing and investing in our creative team to develop further. We are Magma Labs on the, is that on the right course? What are your thoughts there, Tyson?
Well, I think that's a business question, and I think there's probably discovery with your customers to see if they're really responding to that sort of feature set. But I know around my house and with my interaction with my own phone, voice is becoming more and more important. I mean, for me, and this is just a personal statement, you know, that's really how I interact with my phone, unless I'm just reading. So, you know, I think this is really interesting to see how Alexa and voice interactions are coming into the market and commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Mo had another question about, you know, when do we expect Reaction version 2.0 to be stable and to be released? And the good news is we're super close. In fact, one of the last release candidates was one that we were, you know, just about ready to pull off the label and mark it as 2.0. So we're almost at the finish line, Mo. And I think at this point, in terms of what's out there in the release candidates, it's very stable and solid, and we'll be labeling as such pretty darn soon. Okay, let's shift over. We had a couple questions that came in earlier. Tyson, what's the advantage of using GraphQL over REST APIs?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So I mentioned a couple in the presentation. One is that it's typed, it's strictly typed, and it's what's called introspectable, which means that we can really ask the query about, ask the API about itself. So it's self-documenting. So it becomes a lot easier for front-end engineers who are building features. They can take a look at the API, inspect it, see exact types of the data that they want to fetch. A second advantage would be that you can fetch only the fields that you want. So it's a little bit more performant, or it is more performant, in that if you've got, you know, a bigger data set or a bigger object that you want to pull down, but you only need a field or two, then you can specify those fields, and you're only transferring that data to the front-end client. So it's more efficient.
Yep. You had a question about kind of how long does it typically take to spin up a working version of Reaction Commerce. So Tyson, maybe you can talk a little bit about the installation and kind of getting the initial deployment or installation of Reaction Commerce working.
Yeah, so we have a project, it's called Reaction Platform, and that's really intended for this use case. You want to spin it up quickly. So we have that to pretty much a single command that will install and run Reaction. Reaction-platform is that project. Now it does take a few minutes for that process to complete. So just be patient through that process, but it will eventually install.
Great. Just looking through, scanning through some of the other questions. A question about how flexible can Reaction Commerce be to accommodate for selling a digital service or, you know, a digital product. I know there are examples out there in the open source community who have built storefronts that are selling digital products. So it's certainly possible to extend the product types and the schema to be able to support that, and the order workflow and the checkout workflow. But Tyson, anything to add there in terms of flexibility for supporting digital downloads, digital products?
Yeah, we don't explicitly support digital products today, but the product model is very flexible. And so you can extend that. I think this is a great opportunity to write a third-party plugin to support digital products. So if you were to build that, or if someone were to build it, that's a great open source project, open source plugin to contribute back.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the example, back to the kind of prepared content that we had, Tyson, we talked a lot about kind of the order and order placement as our example. Maybe explain how those events are written to the database, or kind of what that looks like in terms of the events and the database.
Yeah, well, there's two ways that this, and this really taps into a point of, you know, how can I get started with an event-driven model? If you already have some existing software, how do you make the transition to event first? And there's really two ways that you can do that. One is go purely event first, and this is the more advanced way to do it, where you would log those events to either an event log or to a database, and then reconstruct the state from those events, and that's called event sourcing. But you don't have to go full event sourcing to get events. Another way is that you can use connectors that would connect to an existing database and pull the data out of the database in an ongoing real-time manner and push that onto an event stream like a Kafka topic or something like that. And that's really an easier way to get into it with, that's called change data capture. There are tools like Kafka Connect that can connect to a database, pull the data out and make it available onto an event, onto a topic.
Yep. So we got a question in from the YouTube crowd. Nicholas started building new functions for Reaction Commerce. And how do I know if anyone else needs these functions? Like to give them back to the community. So what would you say, Tyson, are some of the best ways to contribute those back to Reaction Commerce or to the broader community and to get awareness of them?
Well, that's a good question. I think number one is that there's an organization called Reaction-Contrib, and that holds repositories of community-based plugins. These aren't plugins built by Reaction or solely built by Reaction. And so I would encourage you to just reach out to the team, and we will help you through the process of getting one there. You could also host it yourself and do some promotion of your plugin in some of our community channels. We have a Gitter channel, we have some forums. I think even before building a plugin, reaching out in that community and trying to see who may be interested in a plugin is a good idea as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a question that just came in as well, kind of, since we're talking about event-driven, does Reaction Commerce utilize reactive programming libraries like RxJS? What are your thoughts there, Tyson, in terms of event-driven reactive programming libraries?
Yeah, so we are not using any event-driven reactive programming libraries in the Reaction code base or in the Node.js. We are working internally on some tooling that will ease this reactive event-driven programming approach. We haven't yet released that because we haven't quite gotten the abstractions right yet. But once we do get that to the point, we will release that, and we'll just continue to evaluate other third-party tooling that can help with this as well.
Yep, yep. Questions are streaming in. This is good. Really appreciate all the great questions. Seems like a few questions around kind of how to create plugins in Reaction Commerce, and specifically requests for more documentation, tutorials or demos. And so I hear that, and that's probably a good thing for us to recap after this event. But Tyson, any just kind of high-level overview tips around creating a plugin for Reaction Commerce that you want to share right now?
Well, I know that our developers internally, we're trying to make this a better process as well. And we don't have really anything ready to go on this, but we are looking, and the team's discussing things like a plugin project generator, where with a single command, you could frame out a Reaction plugin project and then really fill in the details with whatever you need to do in that plugin. So we don't have anything now, but we discussed this a lot. So I expect something to be coming, at some point in the future.
Yeah, there are definitely active conversations around this for sure. So Daryl, I saw your question come in. Said, do you have any externally published links with kind of document all the out of the box features that we provide, specifically more kind of business features around the order workflow, order capture, promotions, marketing. The best thing to do, Daryl, I mean, we have some documentation out there, but I think the best thing to do is to get in touch with us through our website, and we'd be happy to walk you through a demo and kind of show you more about kind of all the specific capabilities that exist, and give you as, you know, there's definitely information that we have that we can share around the capabilities that are unlocked for operators in the business side. So the best thing to do is get in touch. So Edward asked, is Reaction currently at a functional level for an e-commerce store? Really love the platform and vision. Thank you so much. And have an online jewelry business and want to start using it ASAP. And so I'll give an answer, and then Tyson, you might want to jump in, but the answer is yes, there are shops out there running Reaction Commerce in production environments, and have been for, you know, quite a while. And so I think in terms of base level functionality and feature set, there's a lot that is in place. I think that you can take, you can extend, and you can modify for your jewelry business. A flip side of that is, you know, we don't have everything. So we don't have, you know, still some components or features in place, but we're continuing to add that. Our community's continuing to add that, but it's definitely at a place where you can run a functional e-commerce storefront. Tyson?
Yeah, well, my answer is yes, I agree. It's at a level you can use this. It's ready to go. Yeah, absolutely. Daryl, thanks for the thumbs up. I'm sold on the technology. Happy to help. Reach out to us. We'd love to see. One of the things that we're most eager is proof points. So if you're building something on Reaction Commerce, let us know. We want to help you. We want to write about it. We want to promote it. We want case studies, testimonials, white papers. So we would love to learn all the cool things that you're doing with Reaction Commerce. And even with events, like if you're not even using Reaction Commerce, this is broader about events and just modern commerce, let us know. We're probably the first that want to know about it, even if we're not doing it yet. Let's see, let's go back to a couple more questions before we want to sign off. Trying to scroll. Love to know about the state of marketplace support in version 2.0. Is it possible to develop an MVP using the current Reaction Commerce? So we don't have a time frame or you know, exact kind of information around marketplace support for version 2.0. It's not on our kind of next couple of cycles. And I saw a question earlier about what is the upcoming roadmap, and so that's something that we do want to share more broadly so folks know exactly what we're working on next. One of the bigger features that's coming up in our next couple of cycles is promotions. So we will be actively working on a promotion service, partly why we use that example of a promotion service, because we will be building it as event-driven. We recently finished a pricing engine, which is also built as an independent microservice using Kafka that allows you to do multiple price books by SKU, which is pretty cool. And so in terms of other features and functionality, we know we can do a better job of letting you all know kind of what's coming next. And that's something that you'll start to see trickle out on our blog and kind of some of our other content channels. All right, Tyson, should we do one more last call? Sure.
Let me scan in here. I don't know. Where's the last one? You see one, Tyson?
I saw a good one. It was up above. There was, okay. There's a question about basically integrating with third parties. Would need to access data from, so a third-party service needs to access data from Reaction Commerce. And I think that this question is really about how do you get data in and out of Reaction with third parties? So we do this in a few different ways. You can build plugins inside Reaction that you know, are reading from the database and exporting or importing. But we're also doing, I mentioned this in the slide before, about converting batch into streams. So let's say you have an external, you know, a file import, So we've written software that will read an uploaded file and then convert the contents of that file into an event stream that's read inside Reaction. And likewise on the outbound side, reading from event streams from Reaction and writing that data to APIs or files that can be readable by surfaces on the outside.
I think, Tyson, when we had kind of some of the content earlier, that's kind of that data at the edge that you're still pulling in. You have to bring into the system via imports and exports, and then convert that into streams. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We understand that Reaction, is often in a bigger ecosystem of, of a commerce installation, and so it doesn't mean that, even though Reaction is streaming, it doesn't mean that everything has to be so that we can do the conversion. But in doing it in that way, as the external systems gain real-time capabilities, then you can begin to stream that data, across the board.
Yeah, that's right. And we're working with, a massive enterprise retailer and doing these imports and exports from these legacy systems and from these external systems to bring them into Reaction Commerce. That includes everything from pricing and inventory and catalog, and that comes into, we ingest it into Reaction Commerce, right?
That's right.
All right, well, that's about it for time. I want to say thank you, everyone, for all the great questions and for participating today. As I said earlier, I know we didn't get to all the questions, so we'll be sure to address them in our recap blog post. And again, thank you so much, Tyson, and thank you all for joining the Reaction Commerce webinar. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.